The rain had just begun to fall over the quiet city streets when a tall woman stepped out of a black sedan near the Central Police Precinct. She wore a simple gray sweater, dark pants, and her hair was braided neatly down her back. There was nothing flashy about her appearance, nothing that screamed power or authority. To anyone passing by, she looked like an ordinary woman with a calm but determined expression. But what no one around her knew was that she carried years of discipline, leadership, and courage behind those quiet eyes. Her name was Commander Alicia Carter, the newly appointed chief of police for the entire city. She had been transferred quietly, and only a few officials at City Hall knew she was arriving that morning to inspect the precinct before her official introduction the following week. Alicia believed in seeing things with her own eyes. She wanted to understand the culture of the department before anyone started treating her differently because of her rank. As she approached the entrance, two officers standing near the door glanced at her and exchanged amused looks. One of them chuckled quietly and whispered something to the other. Alicia ignored it and continued walking inside the building. The atmosphere changed immediately. The lobby was busy with officers filling out paperwork and suspects sitting in chairs along the wall. When Alicia stepped up to the front desk, the officer behind the counter barely looked at her. His name badge read, Sergeant Daniels. Without lifting his head fully, asked in a bored voice what she wanted. Alicia politely replied that she was here to observe the precinct and asked if the captain was available. Daniels finally looked up, scanning her from head to toe with clear disbelief. His smirk slowly grew as he leaned back in his chair. Observe the precinct, he repeated with a mocking tone. And who exactly are you supposed to be? Alicia remained calm. She simply replied that she had business with the leadership and would prefer to speak with the captain directly. That response only seemed to entertain the officers around the room even more. A few nearby policemen began whispering and laughing quietly. One of them muttered something disrespectful under his breath. Daniels shook his head and leaned forward, his voice now louder so others could hear. Listen, lady, he said with a grin, this isn't a tourist attraction. If you've got a complaint, take a number. Otherwise you're blocking the desk. Alicia felt the familiar pressure of judgment building around her. It wasn't the first time she had been underestimated. Throughout her career she had faced skepticism, disrespect, and subtle prejudice. But she had learned something important over the years. Sometimes the truth revealed itself better when people exposed their real character first. So she stayed quiet, patient, and composed. The silence irritated Daniels. He interpreted her calmness as defiance. Another officer nearby laughed loudly and said something that caused several others to grin. Suddenly Daniels stood up from his chair and pointed toward the door. He said you need to leave, he barked. You're causing a disturbance. Alicia slowly shook her head and replied calmly that she wasn't leaving and that she had every right to be there. That simple sentence triggered the moment that would change everything. Daniel's face hardened. He turned toward two officers standing nearby and ordered them to detain her for trespassing and disorderly conduct. The room went silent for a moment before the officers approached Alicia. One of them grabbed her arm while the other pulled out handcuffs. Several people in the lobby began watching closely, unsure of what was happening. Alicia did not resist. She simply allowed them to place the cuffs on her wrists while maintaining the same calm expression. But inside her mind she was observing everything. The lack of professionalism, the arrogance, the speed with which assumptions turned into action. As the officers escorted her toward a holding area, Daniels leaned back against the desk with a satisfied grin, clearly proud of how he had handled the situation. The other officers laughed and made sarcastic remarks as Alicia passed them. One even joked loudly that people would try anything to get attention these days. Yet none of them noticed the small security camera mounted above the hallway capturing every single moment. None of them realized that the woman they had just humiliated and arrested was actually the highest authority in the entire department. And as the door of the holding room closed behind her, Alicia Carter took a slow breath and looked straight ahead. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. Instead, she was thinking about what would happen next. Sometimes the best way to expose a broken system was to let it reveal itself completely. And within the next hour, every officer in that building would realize the mistake they had just made. But before we continue to the shocking moment when everything changes, take a second to support this channel by subscribing. Stories like this remind us how quickly assumptions can lead people to serious consequences, and your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life. Inside the small holding room, Alicia sat quietly on the metal bench while the sound of distant conversations echoed through the hallway outside. The handcuffs rested loosely around her wrists, and despite everything that had just happened, she remained completely composed. Her mind was not focused on anger or embarrassment. Instead, she was analyzing what she had witnessed in the past 15 minutes. A department that should represent discipline, fairness, and respect had just demonstrated the opposite. Officers had mocked a civilian, ignored professionalism, and rushed into an arrest without investigation. Alicia knew that leadership meant responsibility, and what she had just experienced was exactly why she had chosen to arrive unannounced that morning. Outside the holding room, the atmosphere remained casual and careless. Sergeant Daniels was lounging with a group of officers as they discussed the incident like it was some kind of entertainment. One officer joked that the woman probably thought she could walk into a police station and demand special treatment. Another added sarcastically that maybe she was secretly a detective from a movie. Their laughter filled the room, completely unaware that the situation was about to change dramatically. At that exact moment, the front doors of the precinct opened again. This time, 3 individuals entered with a sense of authority that immediately shifted the atmosphere. The first was Deputy Major Robert Hayes, followed by the city's police commissioner and a senior administrative officer. The moment the officers in the lobby recognized them, their relaxed expressions disappeared. Conversations stopped, chairs straightened. Daniels quickly adjusted his uniform and stepped forward nervously. The commissioner looked around the room with confusion. "We're here to welcome the new chief of police," he announced clearly. She informed as she would arrive early for a private inspection. Daniels blinked, slightly confused. "The new chief?" he asked. "Yes," the commissioner replied. "Commander Alicia Carter. She should already be here." For a brief moment, the room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Daniels looked around as if expecting someone important to walk through the door at any second. But no one appeared. The commissioner frowned slightly. "Has anyone seen her?" he asked. One officer hesitantly stepped forward. "Sir, a woman did come in earlier asking for the captain," he admitted slowly. "Where is she now?" the commissioner asked. Daniel suddenly felt a strange knot tightening in his stomach. His mind flashed back to the woman he had ordered arrested just minutes earlier. The calm expression, the confident posture, the way she had asked to speak directly with leadership. His face slowly lost its color. "Where is she?" the commissioner repeated fiercely. Daniels swallowed hard. In holding," he said quietly. The words had barely left his mouth before the entire room erupted with shocked reactions. The commissioner's eyes widened in disbelief. "You arrested the new chief of police?" he demanded. Within seconds, the group rushed down the hallway toward the holding room. When the door opened, Alicia Carter was still sitting calmly on the bench, exactly where they had left her. The commissioner immediately stepped forward and unlocked the handcuffs himself, his voice filled with embarrassment as he apologized repeatedly. Alicia stood up slowly and looked around at the stunned officers filling the doorway. Some of the same men who had laughed earlier were now frozen in complete silence. Daniels stood at the back of the hallway, unable to meet her eyes. Alicia brushed her wrists lightly and took a slow breath before speaking. Her voice was calm, controlled, and powerful. She explained that leadership was not about rank or titles but about character and professionalism. What she had witnessed that morning showed a serious failure of respect and judgment. She didn't yell. She didn't insult anyone, but every word carried weight. The officers realized that the woman they had mocked only minutes earlier was now standing in front of them as their chief. Daniels finally stepped forward, his face pale, and attempted to apologize. Alicia listened quietly before responding that actions always speak louder than apologies. Discipline and respect would be rebuilt in this department starting immediately. The humiliation they had intended for her had now become a powerful lesson for them all. The same room that had once echoed with laughter now stood silent with realization. Sometimes the strongest leaders don't prove their power through anger, but through patience and truth. And if this story reminded you how quickly judgment can backfire, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss more powerful stories like this one.